Sorry, everybody. Yeah, we
Okay.
had a yeah. Well, for some reason, I tried to make myself presenter, and it point to a different person.
Oh,
So that person, yeah, left the meeting, and then closed off our the entire program. That's
oh,
why. Yeah, it made it really yeah, awkward. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Let me quickly go through the agenda. Then I'll transfer screen over to Peter. Hopefully this will work. Hi everybody, welcome to Application Development Virtual Group webinar. My name is Sarah Huang. I'm the organizer of the co-organizer of this virtual group. And today, as you know already, Peter Doyle will present Become a T-SQL Pivoting Ninja in 60 minutes or less. Let me first go through a few, take care of a few housekeeping things, then we'll start. I'll transfer screen over to Peter. So PASS is calling for speakers for the Summit 2020 pre-conference, and the deadline is in March 3rd. And yeah, if you want to be considered, just use this link. It says speakers, call for speakers. And PASS right now is doing an educational content survey, and this survey will help to shape the direction of PASS. And the deadline is also March 3rd. And on March 5th, PASS has a partner webinar. So if you're interested, please take a look. And the PASS Summit 2020 early bird pricing is $13,099, and this offer will end on February 28th. And these are the upcoming. Well, this is our virtual group webinars, and well, this one is already passed, and this is our webinar tonight. And then on March 14th, we have Audrey Gordon from Microsoft to present optimizing business outcomes with Power Automate. This one is mostly for Flow, Microsoft Flow. So I'm sure it's gonna be very interesting. Audrey has been working with this group for a while, and she's yeah, from Microsoft. And on April 11th, Derek Day will do a presentation on database migration. And this title is not the final one yet, but the main content will be around database migration to the cloud, or something like that. And these are the upcoming virtual group webinars for other virtual groups like cloud, database fundamentals, and high availability and disaster recovery, global Italian, and data architect, etc. And as you know already, PASS has many virtual groups with different languages or different topics, different focus area. You may join as many as you would like. These are all free to join. And as always, you are more than welcome to join the first one, which is us, Application Development Virtual Group. And these are the upcoming SQL Saturdays, which is a smaller version of PASS Summit. PASS has a career center, so if you are you're looking for jobs or you want to recruit for talent, and be sure to visit the career center to get more information. And this is how you may connect with PASS through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and PASS TV. Last, if you would like to ask questions during our Q&A session, you may either click this little hand button so that you can interact with Peter directly, or you can enter your question in this chat window and I'll read the question out to Peter. And last one is that if you would like to see the screen clearly, you may use this zoom button to adjust. This is on the GoToWebinar menu bar. All right, without further ado, let me transfer screen over to Peter. And I'll keep my fingers crossed. Hopefully it worked this time. Oh boy, what happened? It just won't go to you, Peter. I don't know why.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you an organizer and see if that helps.
All right.
I think there's something wrong with this. I just couldn't make you an organizer. Would you be able to do it yourself, or okay, maybe I'll just transfer it back to me. No, I don't know what's wrong with this. This software, it just whenever I try to make you a presenter, it too.
Oh, let's see. Well, here we go. Here we go. I think we got something.
Okay, cool.
Let me see here. Show my screen.
Okay.
Ah, interesting.
Finally.
All right. Let me get this going up here. See if oh, that's interesting too. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's see. We have 3 screens we're working today. Let's see if that will.
Well, maybe it's because you got 3 screens.
Yeah. I need to let's see. Oh, there we go. Oh, that is interesting. One more thing here. Let's just move on. Let's see. Ah, there we go.
Okay.
We got it now. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your patience here. We're going to go ahead and through. Again, my name is Peter Doyle. We're going to talk about pivoting. It's kind of a strange how I even came across this subject. Probably like most of you, what happens is you have to have a report for some managers or C-level, and obviously having a very deep database is not going to, or table is not going to really help them to make decisions. But again, Peter Doyle is my face there. I do kind of want to bring up a little bit about what Sarah did about speaking. Last year was my first time attending NE-SQL Saturday, which was in Nashville. And then I went to Tampa, and I started because I needed to network. I wanted to understand and the community and get to know more about people who are in the industry rather than me trying to figure it out. And so I found out you could submit. And when I was in a class, and they said, "Hey, what do you think you'd want to submit on?" I said, "Well, I'm working on pivots," and asked a couple around, and it was one of those things that people would be interested in doing, but the syntax is a little weird. So that's how I got started. And once I put my abstract up, I realized, hey, I don't have a picture. And so this is me here. It's actually about 5 in the morning. In the background is my driveway. It's actually the floodlight that's doing that. But if you'd like to get in contact with me, Twitter at @ThePeterDoyle. Pretty much if you search The Peter Doyle, you'll find me. LinkedIn is probably going to be the best. So if you have any questions that come out later on about this, anything, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and also with Instagram as well. Before I started doing anything with databases or anything with Excel, I actually was a wedding photographer for a number of years, and one of the things I did was reach out to one of the largest childhood cancer fundraisers, and I just presented to them and said, hey, I'm interested in to photograph 100 kids or families who've experienced childhood cancer, and all I want to do is just give them a sheet of paper with black Sharpie and have them write to someone who may be going through the same journey. And you'll be surprised. I mean, I was a nobody in photography. You'd be surprised if you just ask. Most people will say yes. And also did music, and that's another thing too. If you want front row seats for concerts, learn how to take photographs, and you never have to pay a ticket again. And so it allowed me to go on tour with a couple other bands and those type of things. I work for Fiserv, which bought First Data. That's why I said First Data is now Fiserv. I'm a data analyst there, and I mainly do a lot of data analysis, flows, bring them all together with phone surveys. And so pretty much if you're talking to one of the agents and they say, hey, we're, oh my God, transferred to a survey after you speak to an agent, most people say no, but there are enough that we get quite a bit of information from there. So a little bit about myself. I haven't been in SQL for a long time, but I will say a little bit about kind of my nature. Back when I was 18, I lived in North Carolina. I wanted to go to California on my own, and my dad's a Navy SEAL. You kind of where this plays into it. And I wanted to go see my mom in California, and my dad knew my mom would not want that to happen, so he said, son, why don't you go to Oklahoma? It's pretty much in the middle, and then give me a call. And that way I can say, well, if you're already halfway, you might as well keep on going. And that way he can't get in trouble with my mom because he didn't know. So anyway, I got in the car and took 4 days to drive over there. And then not halfway, but in Arizona where the Grand Canyon is, I figured, oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and walk the Grand Canyon on one side. I had no experience, no flashlight. It was a really bad idea. I got lost in there for 24 hours, slept, and I found my way back out there. But on the way back, I said, you know what? I wonder if I can make it in less than 2 days on there, less than 48 hours. And I did, 47 and a half hours. So normally, if there's something I think I'm try to do, we're going to go ahead and do that. So I felt like the king on that. All right, let's go ahead. Evaluations, obviously we don't have any like SQL Saturday, but you can certainly reach out to me, anything you think I should touch on a little bit more, or avoid, whatever it may be. Certainly LinkedIn would also be a good way to do that as well. All right, here we go. Should pivots be difficult? And a lot of times, and hopefully you have your sound, because this is my experience when I first started going with SQL, and maybe this with pivots, and maybe this is what happened to yours here too. And I look at myself as I'm trying to. That's the computer coming back out at you, saying, "Hey, you have no idea what you're doing." So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about pivots. There's 3 parts to a pivot. Normally what happens is when we go and, or somebody wants us to do a pivot, the first thing that's usually going to come out is going to be an aggregation. I want to know how many times this person called in, if it's in a call center, how many times did this happen on a Tuesday, Wednesday, those types of things. So the first thing we're going to do is aggregation, min, max, average, sum, count. Now the first two, min and max, we don't think of those as aggregation. However, when we have a number, like in case of if I'm working with phone surveys, I don't want to have necessarily a average. I may want to have a count, but I just want to have the number that's there, the score. If that's the case, then we're going to use min and max. Usually I just use max because min and max is just going to really give whatever the highest or lowest number, and then that's just going to be the one number in there. So again, the first thing is going to be, hey, we need to get an average of whatever that number may be in that particular column. The second one is going to be the grouping side. So let's say in 2019, I want to know how many callers who called from Indiana. I want to see about that. In Indiana, who used, I don't know, Comcast as their internet provider. The next thing we're going to do is the columns, which we call the spreading, where we're going to have on the aggregate of what is the columns on the headings, right? So let's say we're going to kind of get into a little bit more of scores, 90, 80, 70, 60. And let's say in the column of that score range, 90s, 80s, 60s, 70s, I want those to be the column headers on there. And I want to see how many counts we have per year or whatever it may be. So we're going to have the spreading side on there. So there's three parts. We have the aggregation. How are we going to group on the rows side, grouping on the rows, and what are our column headers? What do we want to have on those? So in my particular case, if I'm doing phone surveys, they want to see it on the columns. They want to see what is the question they're being asked and give the score. And then we want to group by, you know, maybe it's the state, year, or the actual call that came in. And also for the agent who was speaking to that caller beforehand. So let's look at this particular case here. We're just going to count scores for the year. So we see on the left-hand side, we see the year and we see the score. And then we want to group it. As you'll see over here, we have the pivot of we're grouping on the year. We have 2015, 16, 17. And on the top, we have scores 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. One thing I did not talk about was where is this data coming from? I got this from Kaggle.com. You can get a lot of data sets from there. I think Google data set, where you can search data sets, whatever you want. It's kind of like a Google search for data sets they put up there. This is actually the health inspections in Los Angeles. And so this is a short number of it. Again, we have the year on the second or the first column and the scores, typically how we see it, but this doesn't give us any information of what was happening in the year. So when we pivot again, we want to make it a little bit a whole lot easier. So in this case, 2015, score of 90, 33,000. Obviously, we have a lot of places. So we have the aggregation. Remember, that was the first part. And we're looking on, again, the score. You can see I'll highlight the red. And I'm going to go a little bit into the query of the syntax as we kind of go this, and this will kind of culminate. So what we're doing is we're counting on the score. How many times did 90 get in 2015? We have our grouping, right? We have our 2015, 16, 17 we see in green. And then also we have the actual grouping essentially of the score itself that we're going to count for each of those. And that's, of course, what we call spreading the score on there. All right, so that's what we have on there. So let's go ahead and get into the syntax of how we're writing these queries here. So the first thing we're going to have is pivot. We're going to have pivot, and then we're going to have the parentheses encapsulating it. All right, so when we get to when we're going to write it, we know exactly where it's going to be. We don't have to kind of guess. This is where the pivot syntax query is going to be. And the first thing it's going to do is we're going to count the score. Just like when someone asks and says, hey, I need you to get me a report that counts how many, those types of things as a pivot table. So the first thing we're going to do within those parentheses itself is we're going to put the aggregation and the column that we want to do the counting in. All right. And then, now we're using 2 columns. Sometimes we will have, 3 because we want to pull something else out. But we're just going to simplify here. So we have pivot in the parentheses, we're going to count the score, and then for the score, all right, and notice that we have the parentheses around the count score for the aggregate when we have 4, and the column itself we don't. We want to look in that column, and we have the N that you'll notice on the far left there. And what is it in we want to count? Well, we want to look at the 90s. And you can kind of see the groupings, the 80s, the 70, 60, and yes, there is a 50. I don't know how open they stay open, but there was a 50 in there. So as we can kind of see, again, is the pivot, we have the parentheses, and inside, pretty much as we would speak about, I want to know this count in the score of the number of scores right there, 80, 90, 90, 80, 60, 70, 50, and for, we're looking in that column, the score, we're looking at the 90, the individual numbers. You can kind of see the breakout for that. If we're, let's say, in here we put a case statement and we say 80s or 90, 80, 70, 60s, 50s. We want to put those A's, B, and C's, but we only want A, B, and C. Then we would look at it this way as well. It's the exact same thing. At the top, we're going to put the aggregation again of what it is, what column we want to aggregate, count how many of what. The 4, in this case, is in the column. What is it I'm looking for on there? So we can kind of see that again. And a lot of times when we look at this is my problem when I first started looking in YouTube and everything else, is I would look at 3 distinct things. We have the count, we have 4, what column, and the N. But really, it's only 2 because we're doing the count of the score. And what column am I looking in to count the individual data points? In this case, it can be 4 score, and N. When I say 4 score, I think it's the Gettysburg Address. But you can kind of see here, it's only really 2. What column is it I want to count in of, and then 4, and what's the individual data points on there. So with this, we have a question, an investigative question on this here. So when you see the query, we have the count score for the column in, and then we have the individual. But let's look at the table. What's missing from this? What's missing? Normally people would say something. I'm sure you're saying something to yourself. What's missing? There's no year. So as we can see, well, as we can see, we have the count, columns individual, but there's no year. We'll get to the main query, but the columns that are not named in the pivot, that is what will be grouped. It's very important to remember because you'll mess up the whole query if you try to pull entire table, try to pivot, and then you have a bunch of extra columns in there. It's just going to say, if you don't want to specifically tell me what I'm pivoting, it's going to, well, you must want to group everything else. Now here's another question. Order of operations, we're familiar with that. So when we write a select statement, select from, where, having, group by, all those type of things. Question comes in, where does the pivot come in? Where's the pivot come in? So the first thing, we have our select, we have our from, where, having, group by, and then our order by. Well, the order of operations, right? The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to go to from. It's trying to find the table, right? We got to look at the table. Where is it we're getting the information from? If we tell somebody I have a 3-year-old and name is Ren, and I say, Ren, I need you to give me something, right? It's a 3-year-old. So I'm not gonna, you know, I'm just gonna tell her exactly where to start, right? I need you to get me a book. Go to the bookshelf, go to this, whatever it may be. So I want you to, where am I getting this from first? And then next, of course, is where. What's the filter, right? Remember, the where is the filter. Group by, then we have the having that lines up there. And then select, and then the order by. So where does the pivot come in? It's a table operator. Should give you a big hint. Right there in the from. Pivot goes here. One of the problems when I first started was, you know, I wasn't really sure where the pivot was. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just, you know, you learn something new, you totally forget. But table operator, where does that go? Well, table operator goes where all the tables go, between the from and the where. All right, pro tip. Let's take, this is our pivot query. What is, now we don't have a lot. We have in our details of the in clause, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But what if there's zip codes? What if it's data that we don't know how many we're gonna have? It may change all the time. Maybe it's employer or employees. Employees change over, you know, over the course of years. And you can't just go in there and just write the query, hard code certain names, employee IDs, because that can change. So how do we do, as a pro tip, how do we get these, if we're going to hard code them, how can we do that without having to copy and paste? First thing we're going to do is we're going to select distinct. So let's say on this case we had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I imagine in the whole table we may have thousands of rows, millions of rows. Well, we only have 7 days, so we're going to do select. And the next part is going to be the comma. You can kind of see there we have the quotation for the comma plus quote name, and it's a little bit hard to see, but the parentheses right before the Q, and then we have the column as the day of the week. I'm just calling that as far as the column itself from the table that I'm pulling from. I hope you like the fire. But this is what it would look like right here. And so the only thing, so if you ever need to pull them for what is it in the table you're looking for, you can run this query, get them. The first thing you have to do is really just take out the comma on the first by Sunday. Something I didn't put in here is obviously you can put a link for the for this column. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Actually, if you switch where the column's on the other side, I don't know why I didn't do this earlier, but column, if you put the comma on the other side, you can actually put a length so that you -1, and that way you take off the last one, and you'll have everything you need on there. So, and as you can kind of see, what this will do is we'll group, put everything together. All right. All I'm going to do, Sarah, is have any questions come on in about pivots before we move into unpivoting?
Yes.
Okay.
Brad was asking, does T-SQL pivot relate to Excel pivot?
Does it relate to, you'll get the same results?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what the, I mean, it's the exact same thing, you're just coding it. So what sometimes, I mean, I hope this answering the question. What I was hearing before kind of working with this is they may take the data set, just go into Excel, pivot, and then put that back right into, make that as a table into SQL, and then work from there. So it's doing the exact same thing as you would see on the pivot table in Excel, but you're just doing it all in SQL. You're just keeping it in one place.
So I guess, right, yeah, and his follow-up question is, how can I take my Excel pivot knowledge and apply it to T-SQL?
Excel
pivot knowledge. So,
I mean, you're able to do the exact same thing on pivots in Excel, but it's obviously you're coding it. So I mean, Excel, obviously, it's a little bit more automated. You're not coding it per se, you're just checking off the boxes. In SQL, you're going to have to know the code and the syntax to write it out. But everything you're able to do in Excel, you can do in SQL.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Another
that answers.
one.
All right.
Yeah. You got another one. So, can you group the columns, date column by month?
Yes, you can group by anything. So for example, let's see if I can get back to, actually we'll have to go. So what would happen is, I have it a little bit later. So what happened is, say if you're grouping it by month, instead of having in the select statement, in this particular case, it would have the year and the score range, you would have the month in there. We're going to get into that a little bit later when we kind of write out. Let me kind of get ahead of myself here. But I'll make sure we'll go over that because you can group it by anything. In fact, there's sometimes you need so much granularity, you may be grouping by 4 or 5 different columns. So in my particular case, if I'm dealing with phone surveys, is that I may have an agent, you know, let's say by agent, by a state, the day that it's being calling. There's a lot of things that I need to group to get to the granular, level. That I may have 4 or 5 different columns that I'm grouping to get that information. So let me go ahead and anything else that came up about the pivots before I move, because I'm gonna address that on my when we get to a little bit of code. I'll have some time, hopefully.
So for that count, you can either do the count average or sum, you know, for that part.
Yes.
Right above the 4.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use just a column to do it instead of doing count or sum or, you know, other kind of
That's
calculation?
a great question. So part of it has to have an aggregation. So if you just need to have the number itself listed, then you'd use max, but it has to have an aggregation there. So let's say you just want to, when you group it and you make it so granular down to the row level that I don't want any aggregation, I just want that number, then I would use max, because that's just going to give you whatever number is there.
Well, when you use max, wouldn't that give you the only the max for that column? Oh, you use group by, that'll do the trick, right?
Well, no. So what'll happen is, so example for my calls, if I use again, so let's say we have calls, let's say going to different locations, states, different times of days, all those types of things. If I need to get down to the granular level of you know, the call agent, all those types of things, so that it only shows when a customer calls in and they take a survey and they just spoke to, let's say, agent A, they don't want an aggregation of that because we just want the score. So if you are grouping by a number of different columns, you're going to get so granular, it's going to get down to that one score or whatever you're counting, that you, or that number that you just want, and you would just use max.
Okay.
All right, because what happens, again, you know, if you look at your data set at right before the pivot, you know, and it's showing a bunch of different you know, duplicates as far as what you want to group by, then you might have to add some more columns in there to kind of stretch it out, if you can kind of think of it that way. Stretch it out, group, so that at the very end you have that one score, and then that's where you're going to use your max.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
There's one more. Can you show
Okay.
the syntax with the group by?
If we have, are they asking if the syntax with the pivot? You know what? Let's hold that for a moment, because I'm going to bring up the actual query, and then we can kind of go over that, make sure we're on the same page.
Sure.
All right, so let's go ahead. Unpivots. We don't have to deal with them too much, but typically the reason we would have an unpivot, again, you can think of a pivot table is horizontal, right? Just very long, able to read that data. Well, what may happen, and this has happened in the case how I had to learn it, is we would once run some reports, and we have software that's set up to essentially give us a pivot table, right? It's meant to give us some information, really to make decisions for the managers, C-levels, and all those type of things. Well, I may want that data and put it in a table, but the problem is I can't put a pivot table. That wouldn't help me. I need to put it in a normalized table. So in order to do that, I have to unpivot. And what's unpivoting? Unpivoting is ungrouping. So let's look at some syntax with that. Now, I'm using a CTE, common table expression. As you can see up there, it says with U, CT, U for unpivot, CTE. And I'm doing select all. Let me just, the reason I'm doing that, because this is the table I'm using. This, what you see here is the table. There is nothing else. This is everything I need. I want you. All right, so we have the select star from the pivot table where in 2017, January, February, March. That's what I want to see. All right, that's my pivot. They went to the software, they've given it to me. C-level managers have given it to me, and I need to put this into my table. One thing I do want to bring up on the unpivot. The unpivot has nothing to do with the pivot, the first thing we talked about. If you do a pivot, write a syntax for a pivot, and you do it, and then you immediately write to unpivot. Let's say your pivot has an aggregation, average, sum, all those type of things. Well, you unpivot, it has no idea what you just did. It will not unaggregate what you just did. All it's doing is talking about the form, how it came out. So pivoting is obviously we're moving vertical to horizontal. That's all that means. In the case here, unpivot is moving from horizontal to vertical. All right, let's proceed here. So if I'm unpivoting, I'm going to select everything from the UCTE. And the first thing we talked about before is an aggregation. Oops, my bad. It's the first thing we got to put the unpivot. It's the same thing. It's unpivot and the parentheses. And we have the aggregation you see here. And the score range. So the question is, where's the score range come from? Well, what that is the score range is the column I'm just making up. This is the because we don't have one, when it puts it from horizontal to vertical, it has to have a column name. Well, this is where I'm making up that name, whatever it may be on my case. And the 4 score, and we see the score at the top, the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. Again, where's that column name coming from? I'm creating it, because once you go vertical, it doesn't have a column name. We have to create that, but it's going to be the same syntax, aggregation, and what do I want to call the column that I want the 80s, 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. But I'm also going to have to put, again, what those individual numbers are. All right. And then we have the as unpivot. We have to put the alias because it is a table operator. All right. So just want to kind of highlight what's going on here. We have the score range in red. We have the 4 score, and what we're going to count in, what we want to make it in the 80s, 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. Again, I do want to bring up, when you are pivoting and unpivoting, you want to make sure whatever table you are using, the data, it only has the data in there. You really don't want to have a lot of filters in the where. You just want to have whatever information you're having, and just have that, because if the counts will go wrong. In this case, if I put 4 in 90, 80, 70, it may not be right because it's trying to pull everything in there. So the best thing you can do, especially with aggregations, is just whatever the data you want to pivot, that's what you start with. That's why sometimes having a temp table or a CTE would help on that. So I just want to kind of give the visual of what we're looking at here. So before we went horizontal, now we're going vertical. And we kind of see what we're doing as far as unpivoting there. And we see, of course, grouping each of those there. All right, we're going to go ahead and DJ and I appreciate. Do we have any questions on the unpivot? We're going to go ahead and get on to some code a little bit. Maybe some people can actually help me out because I was working on some dynamic stuff and it wasn't working. Sarah, does anyone have any other questions on unpivoting at all?
So far, no.
Okay. All right, so let's go and bring on a little bit. Let's see if this will on here. Good. All right, so this is my table itself. I'm just going to get those out here. And this is, we can make a change on any of this at all. So here is my table of my inspections that I'm going to run. Let me just get the out of there. And you can kind of see activity date, the facility zip code we have here. We have the owner name, who it is, the business name. Let's see, kind of description. We have a lot of data here on this. All right, so on here is what I did was with what we saw on the, let me just run this here. What we saw earlier on the score itself. We have the year. So again, we're selecting the score range. I do want to get into this so we can get to it. So here's the pivot itself that we have. This is what we talked about, having the count. Let's put this back over here. Now, we ask about, well, what about up here? Where's the data coming from? Here's our data. It's actually a subquery. And we always want to have the subquery and select all from there. So we're going to have the subquery of what is it we want to, pivot. We have the score range and we have the year. And notice down here we have the score range. And by the way, I'm using Azure Data Studio, which is great for the development side. It's very fast. I use a Mac, and so that's why I started using it. But I even use the network with the PC. It's just on the development side, it's just a fabulous software to use. But you can kind of see here, again, score range, as it's highlighted, and the only thing we don't have is the year, and it automatically gives us the group on here. Now, let's see. We can also, let's say, we're going to put employee ID on here. All right. Now, normally, very slow at this, but there we go. Now, we just put employee ID here. We don't have it in the pivot. We don't have the year in the pivot. So let's run this. Just put it there. And you can see it went and grouped by the year in this employee. And you can see the counts, 90s, 80s, 70s. So we can add as many group by columns depending on how granular you want to get on here. So let's see what else we have. So we can also have, let's see, let's see, facility zip. This is one thing we do need to pay attention to is the data type, because I was looking to do facility zip. Now, obviously, with the dash and the other 4 digits, we can't make that a number. However, probably want to make this into a number because it causes some problems when I was trying to do distinct to try to put them into the columns on here. Also, one thing we could do, for example, make it a little bit, let me say a little bit more concise. We can actually go and let's group it by day of week. Week there. And if we run this, again, we can see, and if we order it by, let's say, if we took out the employee ID, now this will be for the whole year for everything on here. But again, you can kind of see exactly what you're able to do on here, Friday, Mondays, on here. On now, if we did this, now one thing is we have the from clause out here in between. So after it, we can obviously put order by on that. By, and let's say we're going to do day a week, right? And then we have the Fridays. We should change a little bit to put an order as far as maybe some case statements, but you can kind of see here. Let's see, Wednesdays, if we're looking to look, 48,000. So it looks like Wednesday, probably because more inspectors are getting out during the middle of the week. But it looks like we can see that you have a better chance of getting a 90 maybe if you have them come over on Wednesdays. All right. Any other questions at all? Sarah, anything come in?
I guess you've done a great job. Everybody understood.
Okay. One thing I was looking on dynamic pivots, and this is just one of those things that I was like, I don't know what happened to my code. But somebody will probably ask, hey, and I think I did bring it up. Actually, let me take a step back on here and just address it, because sometimes, as you can see on the code here, we don't have any totals, and we don't have time too much to get on here. But what you're able to do, again, this is the table itself, right? This is the table itself. So what you're able to do, of course, is, let me just push this down. Since this is the table itself, you can take this, make this whole thing CTE itself, and then add Rollup Cube. That's what I don't know what I was thinking about. Rollup and Cube to pull your totals here. So again, remember, when you put this, this is a pivot table. So sometimes if you need to work on some queries and you only need this data, then write this data, and that's all you're having to do. It makes it a little bit faster. So example for us is what we typically do, because we're writing reports, again, for managers, C-level, all that, is when I put it into Excel, so I'm connecting Excel to SQL, I only need the data that I need to pull the charts for. So if I can pull that in a pivot table, I'm going to put that into Excel, and then I'm going to make some, whatever charts or whatever they need to do, that they want to have for the C-level. So just remember this. This isn't a virtual table or anything like that. Obviously, it's not an object, but you certainly can take this, put it into, if you need to insert it into a table, so you can keep information, those type of things, make it a temp table, any of that. Certainly remember, it's not just this is all you can do with it. Again, just like any table, you can put it into, use it, those types of things. All right, so a lot of times people ask, like right here, this in. Again, let's say if it's employee IDs, gosh, I don't know how many, in our particular in Pfizer, we have like 44,000 employees. Obviously, I never want to put a pivot table with 44,000 rows, but there are going to be new employees coming, new employees retiring, those type of things. I don't want to hard code that because that can change. And that's where we get the dynamic. Now, mine has seemed to fail, and so maybe someone can see where I messed up, because I don't know, it's actually telling me an error here. But what we're doing is, the first thing is what you would do on here is you declare your column names. These are the ones, this is the spreading element there. Looks like we're going into time here. Okay. So we have our column name and we have our SQL here. This will end up being where our query is. Now our column name, again, we had our quote name from our inspections. That's our table that we're using here. All right, and we're going to we're going to declare it, and then we're going to set our column name. Now the left, this is where I was talking about on when you do the quote name and you put your comma at the end. The last one obviously doesn't need to be there. So the way you take that out is what we're doing is we're doing the left, starting on the left hand, and we're doing the length and -1, starting left hand counting, and then -1 will knock out this column here. Now, we get down here. So our SQL, we just put, oh, another thing too, forgot to put, the declare SQL, we're going to get a table. And this max here, if we don't put max, let's say you put 1,000, you put something, a number that doesn't equal to, let's say in this particular case, we're going to try and make this whole thing here, it's going to truncate and give you an error. And so we want to make sure that what we put on here, we want to make sure it's the max. This column name, obviously, we don't need it necessarily on that. So let's just say we just put it for 100 on here. So let me come back here again. So we're going to set the column names, the list. And then when we get to the query itself, we're going to set SQL. We have N for the nvarchar here. And what I did here was this is what I was talking about, have the table itself on here. When I run this, oh, let's see, everything from, oh, that's very interesting. Inspection range. I don't spend too much time on that. Just those things, nothing to see. That should run with 1 or 2. And that's actually a number, so I shouldn't know. Oops. On there. There we go. So in this particular case, we're having Los Angeles. The status is active in 2017, and here's our base table on here. Now, we're going to select everything from the CTE. This is our common table expression that we're using here. And this is our pivot. And we're going to count the score range. Now, when we write the dynamic, we can't just take these parameters and just throw this into the N clause here. Remember, we'd have the brackets and the numbers here. We actually have to put the parameter itself with the, as you can see, the quotations. That's why it was doubles over here. So for some reason, there's maybe someone who knows, I don't know what worked on before, but now it doesn't. Let me put this on here. There. Good. So we have the column names as the pivot on here. And this would print, just give me the query itself, but it was actually giving me, it should give me error. Get back here. It should work. It gives me error, which is somewhere here. I'm not sure what I'm missing. But what happens is once we have this on the SQL side, once you want to run it, you would do execute the store procedure, system store procedure, the SP execute SQL, and then that is the query itself that puts it all together, because we have the declaration, the sets, we have the parameter inside the quotation of the in clause there. Looks like we're about at 10 o'clock. I have no idea what I missed here when it worked before. So I don't know if, obviously if you do an nvarchar, you need to have the n in here. So I'm not sure what it is. So if anyone pipes up who can see it that I missed something. But that is where the dynamic SQL. So what this also means is you can actually build into, just think of a form where you can change on the facility city, the program status, the year. So you can put a number of parameters all through here, what you're declaring, and allow you to be able to give you a query that you don't have to always know what's in that table specifically, because you're building the query around it to dynamically, if something is changing, pull up the everything in the where clause, whatever it may be on that part. But I appreciate it. So we're about at at 10 o'clock. I appreciate everyone who stayed out so late to know wherever you are. But certainly, if anyone has any questions whatsoever, wants to reach out to me, LinkedIn is a very good place. Remember, you can always look at the Peter Doyle, and that will I'll just put it back over here. But I think that's about it. I don't want to keep anybody longer. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. Again, if you have any questions, the Peter Doyle, LinkedIn will certainly answer any question you may have.
Peter, would you be able to stay a little bit longer? We have a few questions here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the one you just showed, the dynamic one, does that have to be nvarchar?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Yeah, if you try to put anything else, it's not gonna. It'll end up failing.
If you use varchar, it won't work.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
That's
Thank
correct.
you. All right. So we got another one. So does the regular pivot and not the reverse side require CTE syntax?
No, it does not. So what I use the CTEs only for, let me come back up here, because we're doing the select all from. The reason I have the CT is because you want to have, when you pivot, you want to pivot with only the data that you need, that you want to pivot. You don't want to have, let's say, I'm just using, let's say your columns A, B, C to Z. So you have 26 columns. And let's say you only really need A, B, and C. Well, you don't want to have the table and pivot with only focusing on A, B, and C, because let's say if you forget, you only want to group by A and pivot based on counts of B and C, let's say. Well, all of a sudden, you're going to have grouped of everything else on there. So you only want to have, it's be it a CTE or a temp table, or you have a table that has only the data. That's what you want to use. And I just use a CTE because I like to see the data rather than temp table, because I forget what's in it, then I have to query it and those type of things.
Cool. And someone said the query you just the dynamic one.
Yeah.
Line 43.
Yes. Yeah, I was saying when I ran it right here, my error says line 4. It's this. So if they have something, I don't know if what I overlooked.
SQL equal. Yeah, somebody said it's that one I got the problem.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it is right here. It tells me what's full and everything, but I'm like, I don't know what
I can see.
That is.
Yeah. Okay, we got one more saying that can the Azure Data Studio, that's the one you're using, right? This is the
correct.
Azure Data Studio.
Yes.
So she was asking, can the Azure Data Studio be used in local machine?
Yes, that's what mine is right now. So if I were to pull up here, let's see, you see right here, I don't know if you can see, but it's a local host.
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
absolutely. Yeah. In fact,
Okay.
this is what I use for all the SQL Saturday. I mean, you have, not to go too far, but you have notebooks you can use. So let's say, for example, these are some things I've, oh, that didn't have a lot. Let's see. Yeah. So you have notebooks that you're able to put, let's see if this one will, yeah, you can actually run code through here and gives you results. It's really great. It's a really good thing. Another thing I will bring up, especially with pivots, dynamic pivots, because anytime you start using with stored procedures, because you can certainly build with that, the problem is going to be, for example, your documentation, right? What is this column name? What it can only be, those type of things. So I'm using it two things. One for documentation. If I'm here, it is again. What is happening on here? Also, it's a great way because I have reports that I run once a month, and they can get pretty complicated, and I totally forget what I have to do. And so what I'm able to do is actually say, okay, here's all my what I need to do. Then I run the set, run the query, and then move down here. So it's a great way to keep documentation, especially if you have to, you know, if you leave vacation and somebody else has to pick it up behind you. All that information's right there. You don't have to open up a Word document or anything like that.
Cool. That's a very convenient tool. Hey, E, I have unmuted you if you would like to ask your questions.
Oh, I think Peter has already answered the question. That's very nice too. So it's kind of like a Jupyter notebook.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
It builds off.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see here. We have it can do PowerShell. Yep, Jupyter notebooks. I haven't used them, but it does work something within them. Yeah, I'm just starting to begin to use it, and it's I mean, I started to only because I did use parallels to partition to have SSMS, but it was just taking too much hard drive space. So that's where I started, found this, and it's free. You can just look it up on Microsoft. It's free. Take a look at it. You can have one nice thing is you have extensions, and that's why the color is different. That's another thing I like it. Yeah. And so another thing too is when you
Very nice.
highlight. Yep. Yeah, it's a cool little.
Okay.
Absolutely.
One more question is that I think this was submitted before the presentation. Is how would you tune the performance?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad. All right. So when it comes to these here, we're grouping. And remember when we are looking to index the statistics, the engine needs to know what's in it. And so when we are looking of, especially on this particular, we want to count a certain column. We want to get the information particular in here. And we want them to know exactly what it is they're pulling, right? We want to be explicit, right? I always say SQL's a great way as far as relationships, right? It loves to be explicit. Tell me what you want, not let me figure this out. So in that particular case, when you're tuning it and you're looking at the execution plan, you want to say, all right, I'm counting this here. So maybe I need to put an index here, right? I want to look at this one, especially here too. What are the columns that I'm using for the base data? I want to be able to pull that quickly as well, so that this comes fast, but also at the same time, I want to look at what's here. Now, the best way probably is going to be this. Let's say in this simple one, we have the day of the week and we have the score range. Now, this almost may not be because there's not that many of them as far as distinct, being selective, but you want to look at here and say, look, I want to have the day of week that's going to be the group by. Whatever the group by, you want to probably have that as the first in that index. If I'm creating a non-clustered index, I'm going to create the non-clustered index, and I'm going to start with the day of the week on there, because that's going to be the first one. The other ones here of what the columns are obviously going to be, I want to have the score range because I need it to pull these here. And so if you're going to have, let's say, 3 or 4 different ones, right? Let's say if we have, I think there was like employee ID, date and time, those types of things. We want to make sure that what if the select here, and notice I have the order is going to be the day of the week. Usually it's going to be some kind of grouping, right, of that first one. Whatever your columns are, you want to make sure that you have the index in that order, if that makes sense. Because remember, when you're making the index, it's going to sort the first one, second, third, those types of things. So remember, the pivot is going to pull only what's here. And so it needs to know. And so the fastest thing you can do is make sure that you have your select, whatever you're going to group by. That's going to be the first part of your index. And the second is going to be score range. If you have another one in there, you want to kind of put them in order, especially if you're going to have a specific order by. You want to make sure the order by and the select are relatively on the same order.
So when you say using the index, would you think column 1 would be helpful?
Yes, you want to make sure that, like in this case here, the score range, that I'm going to make sure that's going to be part of the index, because I'm going to have the day of the week. That's what I'm grouping by, and I'm ordering by the first one. And then in this particular case, it's going to be the score range. Well, the engine needs to know where these are, right? How many they're going to be, where they are, so it can seek to it rather than having to scan that whole table to find out where these are. So that's initially going to show up right here, right? When we pull it, we don't want that to take so long, right? Because after it deals with this, then it comes to the pivot, right? Because it has to have this information first.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that when we write our non-clustered index on here, that we're going to start with whatever we're grouping by, and then the columns that we're going to need, because we can have, like, say, I want the score range, but count based on the employee ID, based on the day of the week, right? So I want to make sure that I'm going to have my employee ID in here as well. But a lot of it's going to have to be too, is when you create these indexes, you have to go look at the execution plan and see if it's, because every table is going to be different, right? So you want to kind of look and see what it is that's happening. But what's taking so long on here? Is it sorting taking too long, or the aggregation? So again, a lot of times this information, whatever this is going to be, you want to make sure that's everything, only what you need, because you don't want the engine to start aggregating, pulling everything else, and then you pivot only on some of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, hopefully that answered on it. So again, you're just going to have to go to the execution plan itself, take a look at it, and work through it. Now, if someone has a great resource, would be Brent Ozar. He has some free resources called, think like the SQL Server Engine. So that would be a good resource for
His website?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, let's go see Brent Ozar. Yeah. So this is him in his training. He does have some free classes. Let's see, fundamentals. Yep. You can watch it free on how to think like the SQL Server. This is fantastic. Right here. This is right here. Everything you'll need to know. Everything here is all for free.
Cool.
So yeah, take a look at it, everyone. It'll rock your world on what you're able to do. His resources, again, SQL Saturday, I can't tell you that much, because one of the SQL Saturdays last year, I went to one class. I was able to come back, and a former employee had a report that took 4 hours to run. And I was like, it just does not make any sense to me. And I was able to take what I learned in one class, essentially these types of things here. How does the SQL Server engine look at that query? And I was able to bring it down to 6 seconds. I think I could have gone faster, but 6 seconds is pretty good when it's only ran once a month.
Yeah.
So this is a great way to get a lot of resources. Let's see, another one is query Isaac Ben Gahn's books. I think T-SQL Fundamentals. That's a really really good one as well, to really kind of across the board pivots, those type of things will get you everything that you need. You want a little bit more information or just things across the board, that's a great. In fact, I think let's see, I thought that he just had something come up with I don't remember where he had it, but anyway, Brent had a bunch of books that was really good with those type of things. So
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully that was kind of helpful, but Brent Ozar is a great place to get really more in depth and really tune indexes to get things moving pretty quickly. But that's where I'd start.
Cool. Yes. Thank you for the tip. And yeah. Also, I think Carnegie said solidq.com. It's
Yes.
also, yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. SolidQ. In fact, one of the really good things he has. This is it's been gone. Let me see here. Yep. So obviously you can't go wrong with him. He runs SolidQ, but there is a resources. Let's see, you have books and publications. There is also, okay, here you go. This is what I'm talking about right here, the T-SQL fundamentals right here.
Okay.
Now, I will say this, at Microsoft Press, where you can buy Microsoft books, it does have this in there. I think they're still running a sale, like 45% off, because these books can get really expensive.
Yeah.
But they're running, yeah. So they're, I mean, sometimes like what in the world, because they don't last, right? I mean, they'll get new, couple of new versions, and they're, you know, worthless almost. But this is a great book to get, T-SQL Fundamentals. His on-demand course, I have that, which essentially goes along with the T-SQL Fundamentals. The only thing is, it is $398 American dollars. However, I did find, and I happened to see it, like a summer coupon. Honestly, I looked up just online in Google T-SQL Fundamentals. I just looked up this, I think, and put coupon with it, and I found one, and it had like a 50% off.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the only, I mean, that's pretty expensive. It has a lot of good information. Is it worth the 400? Yes, you know, but if you can get it cheaper, that's how I found it, a coupon. Would just put in the title and put coupon and just kept looking and see, and I guess they just didn't. But it's going to mimic everything from that T-SQL Fundamentals book. And my goodness, he does such a great job of explaining and just putting it down to every man, you know, just a common language. It's really good. But if you get a book, I would start with T-SQL Fundamentals from him.
Cool. That's a great tip. Thank you so much, Peter, for
Absolutely.
a great presentation tonight. And sorry for the technical difficulties. And also, I would thank Pristan for helping to transfer screen over at the end. Otherwise, I don't know what happened. It just wouldn't let me transfer it to you. So this session is recorded. I'll post the recording to our website, Past TV, tomorrow. And Yeah, if you have additional questions, feel free to, I guess, to ask Peter.
Yep, you can reach out to me at LinkedIn. Just look, just search for the Peter Doyle, and you will find me there.
Okay, cool. Thank you everybody for attending. And thank you very much, Peter, for a great presentation.
Oh,
I
thanks
really
so much for
appreciate
having me.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.